All right, good afternoon, everyone. What we wanted to do in this session was to explore some sectors and some areas that don't always get attention in the conversation. First of all, who am I? I am Michael Fitzpatrick. I'm a partner at Brunswick Group, which is a consultancy that does a lot of work with NGOs and with companies around climate and ESG issues, among other things. Prior to this, I've worked at a number of companies, but also twice in the White House helping to run regulatory policy for Presidents Clinton and Obama. So I have a long and sort of deep engagement in these important issues. And we have with us today three leaders from three companies who are very much in the center of the conversation around climate and solutions. What we have noticed is that the vast majority of the energy in the conversation is focused around the important transition from fossil fuels to clean energy sources like wind, solar, hydro, nuclear. And that is, to be sure, incredibly important and perhaps even the bulk or the majority of the task that needs to be done. But what it does is it tends to shine the light away or not allow a conversation to occur around other areas, other sectors where there are climate impacts that are important, but also where there are solutions that are developing. And so what we wanted to do in this session was to bring leaders from three companies, sort of what I would consider in not the most obvious areas when we're talking about climate, agriculture, buildings or the built infrastructure, and sustainable disposal of waste, and to let them talk to you about how they're leaning into the challenge and what their companies are doing to address these very real issues. What we're going to do is we're going to do some quick introductions, and then each of them is going to speak about how their company is positioned in the climate space. They're each going to talk a bit about one or two specific initiatives that they're engaged in to try to be a part of the solution going forward. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges to getting to where we need to go over the decades, right? Which is to a cleaner, more sustainable society and environment. So we're first going to hear from Tequila Smith, who is the Executive Vice President and the Chief Sustainability Officer for Covanta. We'll next turn to Aaron Meason, who is Chief Sustainability Officer for JLL. And then we'll end with Austin Williams, who is Commercial Director for Regenerative Agriculture and Differentiation at ADM, Archer Daniels Midland. So with that, Tequila, I'm going to turn it over to you for some introductory thoughts about Covanta.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. So as Michael stated, I'm Tequila Smith. I've been with Covanta for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was with Southern Company. So I literally went from McDonald's in high school to McDonald's in college to Southern Company. So this is the only second company I've worked for in my entire career. And I start saying that because what would make me leave 25 years to come to a company that is often really not thought about? When we take our waste to the curb, most people, unless you're in that space, they believe it disappears. And you don't call your city or your county or your municipality unless it's there when you get back. So I got a phone call to consider, what do we do with our waste? And that's what we did. So with Covanta, we look at sustainable waste solutions. And we think about when you don't have a landfill, where can your
Clean air, no Covanta. Clean air, no Covanta. Clean air, no Covanta. Clean air, no Covanta. Clean air, no Covanta.
Ladies and gentlemen, please pause.
Clean air, no Covanta. These are false solutions. These are false solutions.
Thank you for your patience.
The incinerator burned out over a year ago. It burned for 3 weeks.
Thank you.
We're throwing up people from the local community.
Ladies and gentlemen, please hold.
Most of the people are getting paid thousands of dollars and don't do anything.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Wow.
All right.
Clean
Ladies and gentlemen, please hold.
These are false solutions. Clean air, no Covanta.
Great. So, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
The point has been made. Appreciate the passion and the concern around important issues. And I think, though, let's all try to have a conversation here, a mature conversation. Pointed questions are absolutely welcomed, and they are up here to talk to you about what their companies are doing, trying to be part of the solution. And these are hard and complicated issues. As you were saying, Tequila, we all produce a lot of waste every day, and it's got to go somewhere, and we've got to figure out what to do with it. And that's the conversation that you try to engage in. So back to you
Absolutely.
to please finish.
Well, thank you for that. And, you know, I want people to feel heard and seen, and it takes everyone at the table to come together. And what I was saying is we all produce waste, and there's only right now, today, 2 alternatives for that. It can go to a landfill that produces methane, or it can go to a waste-to-energy facility. And if you want to have a solution, we have to start with reducing, recycling, reusing. But if you think about the EPA's response to waste, waste-to-energy is the preferred method after reduce, reusing, and recycling. And then landfilling is last. So I think it takes all of us to come together collaboratively and have a conversation. And I would just remind everyone the conversation is 2 ways, and we can't make sure that one voice isn't heard and not listening to the other voice. So I commend folks for having a voice and for standing up for what they believe in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Erin.
Hi everyone, my name is Erin Mezan. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for JLL. For those of you who don't recognize that, it's Jones Lang LaSalle. It's a large global real estate services firm. And so why are we here? Why are we talking about emissions hiding in plain sight? I mean, I think the people in this room understand that the built environment represents a massive opportunity that we need to address in terms of decarbonization and emission reduction, but it still is, to a certain extent, hiding in plain sight, right? It was only during the Glasgow COP that there was finally a discussion track focused on buildings and the built environment. And collectively, this is close to 40% of global carbon emissions in terms of construction and operation of buildings. Massive opportunities. So we see it from kind of 2 spaces. The first is we were the first in the industry to set our own net zero target. So part of my remit is managing our global portfolio to get those offices to net zero by 2030. But the other piece of it is that we manage a little over 5 billion square feet on behalf of clients. A massive opportunity to take the research, the technology, what we're learning with clients and bringing it to other clients, and also what we're learning ourselves. So, you know, we have some really interesting perspective, I think, to share on how do we get what's hidden known so that we can accelerate the built environment transition.
Thank you, Erin. Austin.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Austin Williams, Commercial Director for ADM, Archer Daniels Midland. We're one of those companies, I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with ADM, but one of those companies that you don't hear about too much in the public eye. We don't have a lot of branded products and commodities out there on the shelf or anything like that, but we are in just about every food item that you eat and a lot of industrial items that you use, and then also fuels that you may use as well. So one of the reasons I'm here today is to talk about our regenerative agriculture program. We have, over the past few years, scaled up to almost 3 million acres in regenerative agriculture on a global scale, with goals to get up to 4 million acres. So regenerative agriculture, one of the things that it's done is hide in plain sight, truly. A lot of the thoughts around regenerative agriculture is, well, farmers should be doing better in a larger scale and really contributing towards a solution. And I think what's hiding in plain sight is that they have been, and a lot of the farmers have been practicing regenerative agriculture practices like cover cropping, tillage reduction on land, introducing nitrogen replacement and nitrogen reduction products to their land. But it needs to grow, and we need to hear the farmer's voice. We, as value chain partners, both in the upstream and the downstream, need to take those great practices that have been done for generations and work with all of us. You know, if you're a consumer or a company that buys agriculture, commodities, products, no matter what vertical you're in, you know, you can help participate and get that positive farmer message and practice, you know, more than 4 million acres across the globe. We hope to scale up even further. So look forward to the discussion today and to get a few messages across about what we're doing in regenerative agriculture.
Thanks, Austin. And so when we circle back to you, Tequila, please, if you would, dig a little deeper on some of the initiatives that you have underway. And actually, in light of the voices that were that we heard earlier and the worries about waste to energy, tell us a little bit about how things really work and what the issues are around landfill and methane, because I think it's important when people think about what the solutions are as we transition to a more sustainable and clean energy society, and we all play a role in that. Every single person in this room plays their own role in that. What are the trade-offs? And you know, there isn't an easy solution with a snap of the finger.
Yeah.
And I'd love you to just explore a little more of that hard question.
Yeah, you know, I think it's important for folks to understand that for companies like Covanta or WM, we're handling a problem that we all create. And I think we just sit with that for a little while and understand that, you know, waste is not the sexiest thing to deal with, but we have to deal with it. And there's two solutions. We want to talk about recycling, anaerobic digestion, but we're talking about scale. We're talking about on a national level, right? We're talking about a global level. So when you look at two solutions to something that we all create, what are those solutions? We have a combustion opportunity, and then there's a landfilling opportunity. And so most of the conversations with people that are very passionate about the work, I sit and talk to them every day. Two of them live in my home. They're 18 and they're 22. So that's, you know, that's not new for me. I used to work for a company that had coal plants. Again, not new for me. But how do you make sure?
Excuse me.
Are you okay?
I have asthma.
Do you want some water?
Yes, please. I
Oh
have
my
asthma.
gosh, here we go.
Sorry. I live close to an incinerator.
Oh, I could see that one coming.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That was especially mature.
That's
Okay,
okay.
so over
That's
to you.
okay. So at the end of the day, guys, my questions are this. We have a methane problem. We have a CO2 problem. When you're looking at waste, it goes to incineration. It does. We have a partnership with EPA that regulates us. And it says, here's our permit limits. And the reason why that I'm proud to represent Covanta is because we operate 98% below that limit. And when you test what's coming out of that stack, it's online. We're not hiding. We're not hiding what's coming out of the stack. We're not hiding what we do. So that's why I have no problem when people want to say whatever it is they want to say, because we're doing the right thing. So when you compare what's combusting in our plant to landfills, we're the better choice. It's not something that we say, it's something that the EPA says. And we're heavily regulated. EPA just released the new MAC standards. We've met with them. We've told them, hey, this is what we've been, and this is the climb we've seen over the past 2 decades. And the response to that, you guys have done a great job. Keep up the good work. Continue to make sure those emissions are down. And how do we do that? We have the best technology for air quality, and we have meetings with the communities that say, okay, what's coming out of the stack? I'm getting sick. So we do third-party evaluations where we pay for it. You can select the healthcare providers that come in and do the studies. You tell us what they say. So we're not hiding anything. We live in those communities where we operate, so we wouldn't do anything to harm ourselves or our communities. Thank you for the question.
Sure thing. And just so folks know, and you can look this up on the EPA website, but the new municipal waste combustor maximum achievable control technology regulations are out in a proposed form.
That's right.
And you all are free to comment on those, by the way. It's an open comment process, as is everything in EPA rulemaking. They haven't been updated in 20-something years, so you can also talk to EPA about that. But in the intervening time, on a lot of the pollutant criteria, the industry is down over 90% in control of those pollutants. And EPA is considering that in setting now even more stringent standards. So the regulators are in the process of both codifying the progress that's been made in the industry over the last 20 years and then going a step further to move some of the targets to be even more ambitious. That's just point one. And point two, which I think is important to be part of the conversation, is the sheer volume of methane that is emitted from landfills is very significant. You have biomass degradation in these landfills. We have massive scaled landfills in this country that continue to grow. And the uncaptured methane release from those landfills is a problem that is hiding in plain sight. And so you have imperfect solutions to try to capture that methane at site. Think about capturing it across, hundreds or thousands of acres of landfill. You also have a solution with a heavily regulated incineration solution, which is why it's been endorsed by many European regulators as well as EPA. But again, at the end of the day, if we really want to solve a lot of the waste problem, we can also look in the mirror every morning and think about how we live our lives, okay? I'm going to pass it down to you, Aaron, to pick us up on the other scaled, we have 3 scaled issues, but boy, we have a built environment that continues to expand, which is very energy intensive in a lot of ways. So tell us what your company's doing to try to mitigate against that.
Right. So I think a grounding fact for everyone to kind of understand the opportunity and what's the real kind of elephant in the room in terms of what's hiding in plain sight are the existing buildings, right? So 80% of the office buildings we have now will still be in use by 2050. So that gives us a really grounding view of what's the really big opportunity that we see right now. And the other really important and interesting fact behind that is that to decarbonize those buildings, we know the pathway and we have most of the technology to do it, right? So we know that it is a combination of deep retrofits, so addressing operational efficiency, switching those heat sources to become electrified, on-site renewables and off-site renewables. Like, that's the pathway. We don't have to solve it. We don't have to figure it out. Now, yes, there are lots of challenges associated with doing that at scale. Some of them are really good reasons that need policy, that need collaboration. Some of them are excuses, right? So I think in this sector, it's much more opportunity than challenge associated with that. So, one of the things that we are doing and that we can be really clear on is implementing in our own portfolio and advising clients, what are those solutions? So things like green leases, incorporating those agreements into if you are a tenant, incorporating those net zero considerations, the things that you want to see into your leasing agreements. Deep retrofitting is a massive opportunity that can deliver anywhere from, 40 to 60% efficiency if done right on existing buildings. These are right in front of us. They can happen with existing technology, and there are not massive barriers to implement. So I'm incredibly optimistic about what can we do in the built environment space. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about some of the barriers and some interesting ways to overcome them, but it remains a really clear pathway, something that's right in sight, and something that we can accelerate now.
Thanks, Aaron. Austin, over to you.
Yep, sure thing. So is this the right time to talk about challenges, or are we? Okay.
We're still talking
Okay.
excitedly about solutions
Scale
that you've
up.
got
Okay,
underway.
okay.
But, yeah,
All
but
right.
we'll get there, and then they're
Good.
going to help us get there too.
Good. So for scale up for us, again, we have a target of 4 million regenerative agriculture acres enrolled in our supply chain, if you will, by 2025. Scale up has been tremendous. We've seen a farmer retention rate very high, much higher than we anticipated, because it's not easy to get a farmer to enroll in a regenerative agriculture program and make sure that at the farm level, from a revenue standpoint, whole farm revenue standpoint, that the incentives that we are all providing the farmer as value chain collaborators are going to have those programs that, you know, that they're practicing, whether it be cover cropping, tillage reduction, any of the regen ag practices that a farmer may implement. And it costs money. In order for a farmer to do that year over year, and year over year is where you start to see the real benefits. It's not just a 1 year and done type of thing. That's a challenge, you know, for the farmer. So scale up has been tremendous. Retention rates have been tremendous, and the results have. I think I have some numbers around our 2022 crop year program. We're reporting out our 2023 crop year program right now, but you know, we've seen from a carbon sequestration standpoint over 100,000 metric tons of carbon that have been sequestered in our program. And then from a carbon reduction standpoint, so metric tons of CO2 equivalent that have been reduced, not just sequestered, we saw around 250,000 equivalents of metric tons of carbon reduced. So if you equate those two together and you think about in terms of cars on the road, you know, you could say that our program took away 80,000 cars from the road this past year or in the crop year cycle. So we're seeing tremendous growth. We're seeing tremendous retention at the farm level. Farmers do care about this. They've been doing this for years, and now they finally have the opportunity to expand those practices that they've been doing and get incentivized to do so. Now it's up to us to help keep that going and have these practices build up year over year to see tremendous outcomes in the future as well. So,
Yeah, and thanks, Austin. And obviously, that achievement in and of itself is important, and it's big. It's a demonstration. But to get to where we all need to go, right, that's going to need to scale. And in a minute, we're going to talk about some of the challenges that exist to taking these ideas and scaling them at the megaton level, right? But what I was wondering is maybe you could take a minute or two to just talk a little bit about what the hell regenerative agriculture is. Because I'm not sure everyone in this room knows exactly what that means, and I think Tequila's also going to maybe do a little bit more of a primer on what actually happens in the waste to energy process. So we just want people to make sure that they understand exactly what we are talking about in terms of technologies and solutions.
yeah, sure thing. So we work with a group called Field to Market. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with that group, but it's an organization that has really been a champion of regenerative agriculture and sustainable agriculture. And they've developed a definition and principles around regenerative agriculture. Some of those principles include, you know, keeping living roots in the soil, minimizing soil disturbance, and the practices around, you know, keeping those principles in place year over year. So regenerative agriculture is simply, you know, taking those practices, applying them to row crop and other land, not just row crops, and then instilling those practices into the land for years to come. And a lot of these practices are indigenous. So we're trying to live off of the indigenous ways and practices that have been done for generations. So one good example of regenerative agriculture, if you've got a soybean and a corn rotation on an acre of ground in the Midwest, let's just say Illinois. In the off season of that corn and soybean rotation, the farmer may plant a cover crop to keep a living root in the soil, minimize soil disturbance, and sequester carbon in the ground as well. So it's hitting kind of three of those principles. So that's a kind of a baseline description around regenerative agriculture, and that's what we go by in terms of principles and definition.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Austin. So, and this is the big moment for you because we're going to do challenges now. We're going to get down to you in a minute.
Right.
But because you got the last word, I'm going to cycle back. So what we did want to do, though, is have each of these speakers talk a little bit about kind of the policy or societal, behavioral challenges, maybe financing challenges that might obstruct our ability to take some of these solutions to scale, right? It's across all of the things we've heard about at Aspen Ideas Climate for the last 3 days, you can hear a lot of incredible new exciting ideas, right? And that's good as far as they go. But it's really only good if those can scale massively, right? The problems that we need to deal with are global and they're existential, and they need to scale to the megaton level, which is the way folks talk at Aspen sometimes when they talk about solutions. It's all nice to have a really neat innovation, but can it scale? And so let's go back down the line and talk a little bit about some of the questions or issues that you all see to allowing your mitigation solutions to kind of, I guess, obtain or achieve their full promise in terms of climate benefits. And we'll
So-
start with you, Tequila. Thank you.
Okay, so our conversations with customers are typically around waste, but specifically, how do they move up the waste hierarchy? And so if you think about the European Union, there's a landfill tax, right? So they've already acknowledged that landfilling is the absolute last resort. But before that is energy recovery. And so what Michael and I were whispering about is everyone understand what energy recovery is. So the reason why they call it energy recovery is because otherwise this waste would sit in a landfill and creating methane. But there is a solution where you can take that waste, combust it, create steam, the steam turns the turbine creates renewable energy. It is not a definition we created, it is a definition by the EPA, it's a definition for the European Union and their climate company, their client team that says something that would normally just sit and literally waste away, we can do some good with it. So Covanta and other industries, we power over 1 million homes annually with renewable energy. So now we have customers, industrial, municipality customers, governmental customers that come to us and say, I want to move up the waste hierarchy. I don't want my waste to go to a landfill. You're doing really cool things. We're recycling wastewater. We are removing metals that otherwise would have to be mined. And so how do we do that? We have one-on-one solutions. I'll name a couple of companies. I won't say their names because I don't want them to have to deal with certain things. But there are companies that have zero waste landfill policies. Because again, when you're looking at the authority that handles solid waste and air, it is the EPA. So they go to the EPA and they say, I want to do better, and they point us. They point these customers to us. So one particular example, it was an automotive company, and they didn't want to send any of their waste to a landfill. So they sent their waste to our MPS, which are material packaging facilities. So it's not automatically that it'll go to an incinerator. We find some good in the waste. So that's what we call last mile solutions. You give us a waste, we literally dig through it, and we find some good in it. If it's metals, we can recycle it. If it's cardboard that is not ruined in the sense of oils, we can take that. Even if it is ruined, we can take it and create alternative fuels. So what are alternative fuels? It's for companies that have power plants or that they have cement kilns that would otherwise burn fossil fuels. We have something that's cleaner. So it's the plastics that can't be recycled. It is the cardboard or microfibers that can't be used. Instead of it going to a landfill sitting in a barrel, we can take that and create alternative fuels. So that's one solution. We work with the federal government on drug take-backs. So think about the drugs that have expired in your homes or at the pharmacy. You can't send that to a landfill. So again, there are just certain things that, because of the danger that it causes for our nation, you can't send it there. So there has to be a ultimate secured destruction process where this can happen. So think about the drugs that have expired, or more harmfully, illegal drugs. When the DOD seizes those, where do they go? Again, things that we typically don't think about between our 8 and 5s, but there's a secured process where we have advisors through the DOD that watches the entire process to make sure that these drugs are taken care of, and then they go to our facilities. And so that's a partnership that we're really proud of.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Aaron next, and to Austin, and then back to you if you wanted then to add anything on challenges from from a policy or societal standpoint. But we'll give you a breathing moment, and go to you, Aaron.
So we see the opportunity in buildings. As we gear up to think about this, and we say, let's talk about deep retrofitting. And for everyone in the room who's kind of not in the industry, good reminder that we should describe what a deep retrofit is versus a light retrofit, which is something which is an MEP, which is kind of in the middle. But fundamentally, that's about sort of like a really deep look at the building and planning and action that fundamentally changes systems or function of the building, right? So this is, changing out building energy system. On the other extreme of that, a light retrofit would be something like, lighting changes, right? Just so everyone gets a sense of that. But when we talk about that and we think about, a company sees the opportunity, a city or a county sees the opportunity, and we start to embark on this, there are immediate barriers along the way. And there are human barriers and there are policy barriers. And some of those Immediate human barriers are things like lack of capacity, lack of knowledge, lack of data, lack of building analytics, lack of, digital tools to really understand what's it going to take to go from A to B. Again, all those are solvable, and there are on-ramps to take to sort of start to address many of those issues. Coalitions and partnerships, green building challenges, things that you can do to kind of get those actors comfortable with doing their first deep retrofit, designing their first, 10 buildings that they're going to focus on to make change. But like a lot of the solutions we talk about, there's the technology, there's the policy, and then there's the people. And in every one of our sectors and every one of our swim lanes, we've got to make sure that we're addressing all of those things, right? So on the policy side, barriers that exist are things like lack of, benchmarking ordinances, lack of, in some parts of the United States, electrification ordinances, lack of commitments at the city level to be net zero, because so much of what a city would need to deliver that is the buildings within the city. So there's policy barriers, but I do think there's a fundamental reimagination on the built space of what it means to be a building owner and a tenant. And we all kind of have to come to grips with that and show up in a different way, which means we ask different things of the people who own and manage the buildings that we're in. We ask different things of building developers, and we start to integrate those now into our leases, into our systems, in the way we manage our properties. And we start asking for more sophisticated tools. And so I really think like the one thing I would say about the barriers is no one of us in any of these swim lanes, industrial decarbonization, wind and solar, what you're dealing with, we don't just have one barrier. We've got to navigate all of those three.
Thank you, Aaron. And Austin?
Yeah, I would say our two biggest challenges, and really not just us, the agriculture industry as a whole when it comes to regenerative agriculture and sustainable ag, it's not the value chain partners that are collaborating between us as an ag processor and then downstream CPG companies that are also partnering with us and with farmers to implement these programs.
CPG is?
Say it again?
CPG is?
Oh, consumer packaged goods.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm on acronym patrol over here.
Sorry.
Don't worry. Okay.
Yeah, CPGs or fuel companies, whoever we sell end products to, they're collaborating with us and on most of our acres that we have. It's not the collaboration, it's the cost to the farmer that's going up. You've got input costs that are going up for fertilizer and various crop inputs, seed technology and seed that's going into the ground. That impacts the farmer's whole acre of ground where they're growing crops. So may not have a direct impact on the cover crop unless the cover crop seed is more expensive, which it could be as well. But it's got an impact on the total farm revenue, which a farmer may say, I don't really want to do a regenerative agriculture program unless I'm getting incentivized to cover my cost at a minimum. So we've got to all collaborate between the downstream consumer, goods and companies that we sell to, us as ag processors, and then technology at the farm level to figure out more creative ways to get that cost down to implement these programs. I will say our other barrier, a little different, is data security. It takes data collection and emission scoring from that data collection at the field and farm level in order to implement these programs. Farmers, just like all of us, don't always want to give up their data. So it's down to companies and then our technical assistants and data collection partners to make sure that data security and having a limited amount of platforms that farmers are entering their information into, make sure that's extremely tight and that farmers are verifying that security is tight as well. So I would say those are our two bigger challenges that we're actively working through. So
thank you very much. And Tequila, I want to give you an opportunity if you have something to say about challenges. Otherwise, we'll move on. You're not on the spot.
I can think of one or two challenges
Okay.
for today, but no, seriously, I think there is an opportunity for more collaboration. I think we go in and talk to the EPA and then we leave, and then folks who don't necessarily appreciate incineration, they go and talk to them. So what we've tried to do for the three departments that I lead, which is environmental compliance, government relations, and community outreach, is to extend invitations and have collaborative conversations where we typically haven't been invited. Hence, places like this, because I don't think you're not going to get to where we need to be as a nation and as a country, or as global citizens if I'm having conversations with like-minded individuals only. We have to come up with the solutions, and it has to be something that, as you mentioned, to scale. So, one of the very first panels I spoke on 2 years ago, I was at a HBCU, and the gentleman comes up afterwards. He said, "You did a good job, but I want you to close all your plants." And I said, "I understand that. Thank you for your comment." I said, "Where does your waste go?" And he says, "It goes to your plant, but if you close, then I would not be so wasteful." And I said, and there are people who believe that. There are people who believe as long as it's a solution, people are going to continue being wasteful. But I will tell you, in my house, we recycle, but we still have the same amount of waste because we measure it as we did the year before that and the year before that. So until all of us can get in the room and respectfully collaborate on real-time solutions that can happen in 10 years and 20 years, then we're going to continue to be divided. So I would say we need to have conversations together, and we need to work on solutions that can be applied today that will also help us for the next 2 decades.
Thank you very much for that. So last question, and then we're going to turn to your questions, which are equally important. We're at a conference that is whose close partners are the city of Miami. We've talked already about the important role that cities and municipalities play in these issues, both in the challenges, but more importantly in the solutions and the opportunities. For each of you, and with you, Austin, it may end up being at the state level rather than the local level, but it definitely clears the bar for an answer. How do you all, what's your relationship like with cities? How do you engage with cities? Tell us a little bit about how that works at each of your companies. And I'll start again with you, Tequila, and go down the line.
Okay, so another little known fact for the facilities that we operate, most of the time we have a partnership or an agreement with municipalities. So while you don't see a Covanta truck or you don't see Covanta on your waste container label, we are the company typically behind your municipalities. So you obviously have an agreement with your municipality that says, when I take my trash to the curb, you're going to do something with it. And so I would say for municipalities that have a zero waste to landfill goal, we're usually their first call. For municipalities that haven't quite figured out what their goal is, they have a long-term idea of zero waste, but they need that interim solution. And so for us, we're partnering with, I'll name just a few cities. There's a city in Indiana that is looking for a zero waste solution. And their goal is 2040, 2050, because it takes capital, right? It takes capital to do that, but they don't have constituents that can afford, tax upon tax upon tax. So they're looking for us to help them with that. And so with the steam that we generate, they sell that steam to other companies within their downtown footprint to help raise capital so that money can go back into hopefully a zero waste complex that they're looking to build. But again, what can we do in the interim so that when we have raised the capital, or we've gotten to the point where we feel like our constituents can't afford a more costly solution, we can be there at the table.
Thank you very much. Aaron?
I think the first thing is we can show up as a global business to support cities on policy efforts. So there are several cities where we have been a vocal participant in front of the city council, working with CSOs to lend our voice and the support for things like building benchmarking ordinances and electrification ordinances. It's super important, right, when you're like in the city of Chicago and the mayor wants to show up and say, we fundamentally want to change how buildings are being built and what the energy supply is to those new builds and eventually what it will be for existing buildings, to have a large global billion-dollar company show up and say, it's a great idea, this is where we need to go, it's where we as a company are going, it's where our clients are committed to go. So I think that kind of support for policy is really important, but I think we do have a massive opportunity to go deeper than that and to be much deeper partners on things like showing what's possible. So I'm going to call out a colleague of mine here, Angela Kyle, who's spent a lot of time working with a really interesting collaborative group that encompasses city, higher ed, innovation, technology, that recently worked for kind of like almost a year putting together a proposal to seek funding and support from the federal government for here in the Miami region around a climate tech hub. And that level of collaboration where everyone comes together from different sectors and says, this is what I can provide, this is what I specifically can do, this is our role, this is what we commit to. That's the level of collaboration we really need, right? So I'm super excited that it's happening here. It needs to happen in every major city. And so I think that's an opportunity we have. And sometimes it's just showing up and asking. And I mean, shout out to Miami-Dade County, you know, the mayor of Miami Beach. I was here last year. Show of hands, who was here last year? Oh, so some of you are like pretty new. The conversation here in Miami and Miami-Dade County from last year to this year, thanks to some of that collaboration and work on the Climate Tech Hub, has become incredibly specific. Because that's what we want as a business voice, right? You want to show up and say to the mayor, what do you need? And you don't want to hear, get involved, right? You want to hear them say, we need funding, we need your commitment, we need your collaboration, we need you to show up, we need you to engage your clients, we need you to support us. I just had a conversation today with someone and they said, we need a net zero building in Miami, right? So I think we have massive opportunity to keep first showing up and then getting really specific about roles, collaborations, and goals.
Okay, great, thanks. And to you, Austin, and then we'll
Sure.
return to you all.
Yeah, sure thing. So speaking on regenerative agriculture, we don't directly get involved with cities, I would say. Our government relations team, whenever we're setting up a regenerative agriculture program or trying to recruit growers that we may or may not buy from today in a certain area, they'll give the city a heads up, if you will, to say, hey, we're putting forth this effort in your city with your farmers or in your municipality, but there's no joint city effort that's official or anything like that from a regenerative agriculture standpoint. The one thing that I'll say that is maybe not, you know, directly city related from like an entity standpoint, but from a farmer community standpoint is, you know, it's a little more unofficial, but farming communities are communities within small rural municipalities or cities. So we have very, very pointed efforts with those communities to, you know, build up a regen ag program or regenerative agriculture in that municipality or that farmer, you know, community that we're targeting. So we have farmer rallies that we put together. We've done one, you know, 20, I think, over the past 2 weeks, I would say, across the Midwest and the central part of the U.S. to say, you know, look at the results that their program is achieving. Look at the impact that it has to your community, and we want more farmers to be a part of it. Jumping up to the state level, when it comes to ADM as a whole, from a processing standpoint and from an agriculture and farming standpoint, we collaborate with states very often. So in some cases, I'm not the right person to speak on that, but you know, when it comes to sustainability policy or mandates that are put in place, we are often called upon, or we may proactively reach out to states to say, we can be a part of the solution, we can accelerate the solution, whether it be within the farming community or within our processing plants, we play a big role. So across most states in the U.S. where there's, you know, farming and then agriculture processing, we play a key role there.
All right, thank you very much. So right on time, we're ready for the Q&A. Are there questions? We've got a couple over here, I see. So great. I think right here. Hi. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. There we go. Now we can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Maria Lopez. I'm a member actually of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. So I'll say it's nobody's fault up here, but it was disturbing to see communities from here get thrown out. And in general in Aspen, I've been a little disappointed about the lack of community voice, because I think if we're gonna even talk about incineration, you know, as a potential climate solution, they should be up there talking. and having that voice really heard, because unfortunately in this country there is environmental racism, right? And 80% of incinerators are located right next to communities of color and low income communities. So it's not that incinerators are all bad. Obviously, we haven't come up with another solution. But where they're located and their compliance records are really bad. In my community in Ironbound in Newark, New Jersey, Covanta has had 800 violations over the past 7 years. That doesn't speak of compliance. EPA changed those regulations because environmental justice groups sued them, right? So it's not all on Covanta. We also have to systematically fix the problems that are at hand with our government. But I'm disappointed to see it not acknowledged, right? That communities deserve a seat at the table, even if they have to. I don't like this writing off of communities, like this is somehow
Can I ask a
immature.
question? Is there a question
Yes,
coming?
of course.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
you say you want to hear everyone's voice. Tequila
I
invited us to have
do.
a voice.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying I've been disappointed at the lack of representation of the other side. We can't just talk about these things in the abstract, because we live in a very racist society that has made the burden of all the pollution and all the solutions when they malfunction on communities of color.
Right.
So how does Covanta, because you play kind of both sides with Covanta, not you, but the company itself, right? Because I understand this is not about you as a human, it's about the institution. How does Covanta deal with that tension of being in communities that vehemently oppose Covanta? And, in Doral you burned down, and it was because of your compliance record. And I'm not hearing that exactly be addressed, and how you're meeting with those community members that are upset.
Right. So let me.
May I?
You may. Absolutely. 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 So let me just say one thing. First of all, we don't design the Aspen program for 3 days, right? We were bringing 3 voices with companies who are dealing with the climate issue in a variety of ways. With respect to your voice was heard, and all of your voices are being heard here, probably more than in any other venue. But that's shutting down a discussion. Okay, their voices were heard, but we're here to talk to you. Okay, so that's quite different. That's quite different. We are here to respect. We are here to have a conversation, and we're here to let everyone engage in a conversation, even if those questions are, as you have poised, skeptical, critical, but you presented in a respectful way. So, please, Tequila.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for your question. Just for those that weren't clear, her question was, how does a company like Covanta continue to operate with the violations that you mentioned and being in an environmental justice community? So I'll take you back to when these facilities were permitted. It was 20, 30 years ago. And several of the communities that are there now didn't exist. I'm not making an excuse for it, but it's a timeline situation. So now that the communities are there, what do we do about it? So we go and we talk to the communities and we say, what do you want? And it's never an air quality conversation. We say, do you know what's coming out of the stack? Here's the website. We bring it in paper for those who may not have access to the internet. You know what they say to us? 9 out of 10 times. So there is a 10% where it's an air quality conversation, but 9 out of 10 times it says they say we want jobs, we want help with our schools. If you're going to be here, we want you to be a good partner with us. And so when I came in the role 2 years ago, I sat down with the CEO and we had a conversation. We're not just going to do this lip thing where we go and say, okay, we're going to do X, Y, Z. We're going to be a true partner. The very first thing was we want jobs. Because if you look around Ironbound and other communities where our facilities sit, it's not just Covanta. These are industrial permitted areas. So there's wastewater treatment, there are airports. But it doesn't help this conversation if I point to those. So what we do, we say, tell us what you want. We want jobs, we want better schools, we want better parks, we want clean roads. We don't want your trucks rolling, putting potholes in our roads and then not fixing them. So although I could point to so many other industries and companies that have the same issues, I don't do that. We fix the problem. We fix whatever it is in that moment that they want. And if you don't believe me, check the records. Check the open policy meetings we've had, the public hearings, they say they want X, we give them X. We live there. Covanta employees live there. So you will never hear us say shut it down. Going back to Michael's point, we were here to have a dialogue. That wasn't a dialogue. But I commend you. I commend the passion that you have. But in order for us to fix it, we have to come together. So thank you for your question, and I appreciate it, and I want you to continue to ask those.
Absolutely. Other questions? Let's go to the other side.
Thank you. Plus one to listening closely to communities and making sure their voices are uplifted. This is a question on regenerative ag, though. My name's Connor. I work for the Nature Conservancy in the state of Maine. And one thing that we are grappling with right now is PFAS contamination on ag lands. And I'm really interested to just kind of hear from your perspective on, and I guess if anybody doesn't know the context of PFAS contamination, these are forever chemicals. In the case of the state of Maine, one practice was from the pulp and paper industry many years is the spreading of sludge across ag lands, unbeknownst to farmers at the time that this was a terrible practice that contaminates that land. And so I'm just curious, your perspective on the role of restorative or regenerative ag on ag land remediation and really kind of partnering closely with farmers in those situations where they're really, I guess, waking up to the impacts that contamination actually has on their business and their families and their communities.
Thank you for the question. Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Connor. So one of the principles that we live by as part of our Regen Ag program is responsible management of crop inputs. So that could be coming up with a more organic solution that has an ultimate, benefit to the farmer because it's going to lower their carbon intensity score and they're going to get better value out of that. But also has an impact on the surrounding community outside of that farm and the farm itself for years to come. So by incentivizing farmers to manage their inputs responsibly, no matter what crop input that may be as a part of their crop nutrition plan, that's one of the key pillars of our program. We incentivize farmers to introduce that. We also report that out in our metrics and outcomes report, which we deliver internally to our own company and also to downstream customers that may be a part of the program. So I would say that's one of the areas. Minimizing soil disturbance actually has a huge impact on that. And then also there's a water quality metric because a lot of these crop inputs, they run off from the farm and the water as well. So I think if you look at the 5 principles of regenerative agriculture that we go by and that we incentivize, we're actively making impacts in that area. Now, there's still a lot of work to be done long-term and a lot of discovery. We're collecting a lot of information as we implement these programs, and the information that we collect, we may use to incentivize farmers to do more, or maybe even come up with some other principles for us all to live by as well when it comes to regenerative agriculture. So it's kind of, regenerative agriculture has been focused on like cover cropping and tillage reduction and maybe one key pillar. But the next frontier is really around that management of inputs and some of these more, I would say, difficult practices to implement and manage, but they have a big impact on all of us, and that's kind of the next frontier. We've really just gotten started. So thanks, Connor.
Great. Other questions? Yes, ma'am, right here with the red glasses. Sorry.
I don't think
Got to
I'm
finish that thought.
So I'm an innovator, and it sounds like we're in the early days of solutions across these multiple verticals. Covanta, I'm curious if you've thought about ways to reduce the particulate matter that's coming out of the stack when burning energy. Obviously, we're talking about data and all kinds of technical supports that might be relevant in buildings and agriculture as time goes on. I'm curious about, and this is sort of a broad question for everyone, how innovators like me who like to make solutions for problems across industries can connect and be a support for multiple kinds of operational goals into the future.
Great.
I'll take a stab
please
at
you
it.
start, and then I think this may be one that everyone can have an answer to.
Yeah, as I mentioned, before I took the role, we weren't invited. So we had to extend the invitation for folks that have typically been against incineration to come and talk to us. I'm happy to report that we now can have conversations. Schools are reaching out to us with innovative solutions. They want to sit at our plants and actually do their own testing, even though we have third-party testing. But I think now we can actually start engaging. It really has taken us a very long time to have decent conversations where people will come and talk to us. I don't know if it was just, this imaginary wall that was up. I don't know if it was we just felt like we weren't being heard and communities felt like they weren't being heard. But now we have an open door policy where we have things on our LinkedIn, we have posts on our Instagram where we're saying, hey, we are open for business and we want to hear solutions, particularly for PM 2.5. We have an environmental compliance team that the majority of those individuals are Gen Xers or younger, and they challenge us every day to do better. So what we're doing now is looking at the MACT ruling that just came out. Where are our plants out of compliance with the proposed? None of them out of compliance today, but for those new rulings, where are we out of compliance? We are meeting with our engineering team to make sure that we can continue to operate significantly even below the proposed standard. So to answer your question more succinctly, we want to hear your solutions because we don't pretend that we have all of them. We're just really excited that people are now wanting to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tequila. Please, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, for JLL, there's a couple places. So there's something called JLL Spark. If you've never heard of it, it's sort of a venture side of JLL where we will look at and invest in. So I know sometimes that's weird where someone on the panel is like, just, Google it. You can send me an email. You can find me on LinkedIn, aaron.meezan@jll.com. I will hook you up to them. So we have JLL Spark, and then also we have JLLT. So we have a technology arm that's really looking at what are the technologies that we need, what are the investments we need, and that's not just solely focused on kind of prop tech, building management, technology. It definitely has a broader lens around climate, and we are broadening that lens. So I think those are, kind of two options, but, it's not as easy as just let's connect. And I will get you through the maze of that. And for anyone else in the room, happy to do that as well.
Yeah, from question? Oh. No. From an agriculture standpoint.
To you.
Yeah. From an agriculture standpoint, let's just say the time is right for innovation. The list of companies that we have, one of our key pillars is innovation in agriculture, and that's both coming up with innovation efforts on our own, but we're an ag processor. Like we need partners, and that comes from universities and it comes from very well established technology companies as well. So the time is right. I would say from an agriculture standpoint, ag tech and ag focused conferences are a wonderful place to connect to ag processors, farmers, and everyone in the agriculture value chain to bring, your idea or solution to the table. And also, similar to what Aaron just said, ADM, we have a ventures arm, and we also have an innovation partnership arm. And I am more than willing to make connections there. Some of those initiatives I lead on my own as well. So I would just sum that up to say you asked the right question at the right time when it comes to agriculture. So.
Great. Thank you, guys. I'm getting the signal that we're out of time. But I just wanted, first of all, I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank you for your important questions. I think we acknowledge that there are important views in this audience around some of these issues. I really appreciate all of you being willing to come here and sit up on the stage and answer these questions and explain what your commitments are and what you're trying to do at your various companies. And I think for all of us, if we're going to get from here to there, we need to keep working together to have conversation and dialogue and look for solutions and look for partnerships to move things forward, understanding that a lot of these issues are very complicated and are going to require all of us to work together to get where we all want to go.